Welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my partner, Wes Brown. And we are doing the remote thing as we're into the throes of this pandemic. And if you listened to our podcast last week, it was just Wes and I kind of talking about where we wanted to go with this podcast and what we foresaw in the future for this thing. So now we've learned some new technology and we'll start doing these podcasts remotely. And this is the first podcast that we've actually been able to do with a guest. And today we have the honor and privilege of sitting down with Lorenzo Chavez. Lorenzo, how are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Doing
fantastic.
Excellent. So happy that you were willing to do this. You've been on my short list of people to get on for a while, and you were actually in my next round of people that I wanted to contact before all this kind of went sideways and got a little weird. And so we released a couple interviews that Wes had done with some people up in South Dakota that I wasn't a part of. So we're happy to be back together doing an interview. And that was so nice of you to do this short notice and also take the time out of your evening away from your family, away from your wife, and spend some time with us. So I really appreciate it.
I've been looking forward to it all day, and I really appreciate this opportunity to do this with you. I know, it is. It's different times now, and so I just want to say hello to everyone out there and wish them well and hope they're staying safe. And, it's a time where kind of isolated, but in a way kind of together. I think I've talked to more artist friends and family over the phone than I normally do. So I hope that's happening to everyone and getting to be connected in another kind of way.
I think when all this is said and done, we'll really have an appreciation for that one-on-one contact.
Definitely. I think so too. Yeah. It's, I look forward to it. I'm a big hugger. So, I'll get back to hugging. And so.
I am too.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Well, so I'll give you a big hug when I get to see you.
Exactly. I look forward to, maybe having a beer with you guys down the road and talking again in person.
Great.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward
awesome.
to, Todd told me about you it's been a couple months ago actually. And, I went to your website and like I said before, or earlier before we started recording I just love your stuff. The Southwest, landscapes and everything just really speak to me. I love that area. So kudos for you. You're just a phenomenal artist. Thank you so much for sharing.
I appreciate that. That makes it worthwhile. It's a long journey I've been on doing this, and it's hopefully a long journey ahead of me as well. But, it's really interesting what it's done, how it's opened up doors I never thought would be there and opened up adventures that I never thought would have existed. So it's always new and interesting in this field of the fine arts, so.
I can tell you this much. In the interviews that we've done thus far, you're well revered by your peers. Your name has come up multiple times in our interviews, and so when I checked out, everybody says phenomenal things about you, and I would put your art up there with your paintings up there with anything that any of the 20th century landscape masters produced. I mean, I really
thank you.
I do. I think it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
So how did you get started in art? We were talking before we started this, that you grew up in New Mexico. Where in New Mexico?
Correct. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My family is one of these old Spanish families that's been there for a long time, part of a land grant. We trace our roots back to 1690 in the Albuquerque area. So basically, I guess they liked it because they stayed. My dad still lives there. I'm not the first generation to leave New Mexico. My uncle left to go to California. Actually, we were talking about California earlier. He moved to San Diego back in the 70s. But prior to that, I can't think of any family member that actually settled outside of New Mexico. So we sort of stayed there multiple generations. And so I think that kind of gets in your blood, that region, it's in the blood. And I think you asked about the interest in art, and I know it came very early. My dad used to take us to this, it was a free museum. It was the Albuquerque Art Museum. It was over at the old Sunport in Albuquerque. And I think it was just something we could do because it was free. So he would take us, let us roam around. But I think I was probably 10, 11. And the paintings I saw in there just grabbed me in some weird way. I mean, I just was drawn to them. I couldn't communicate, couldn't intellectualize why they were so attention getting to me and so became so important. I relished the opportunities we had to go back to see the works. I had no idea who the artists were till years later when I was able to revisit the museum as an older adult and realize who these painters were. But that definitely was kind of the, I guess you could say it was the spark that kind of lit the ember. Mm-hmm. And it's been like that ever since. I've just been fascinated with art all along. And, since junior high, I would go to this, you were talking about the Cherry Creek Arts Festival. There was this festival in Albuquerque. It was an arts festival that they had every summer outdoors. And I would pay my 50 cents to get a ticket and spend the afternoon, and I relished roaming around the booths and looking at what these artists were creating. And eventually, I just had to pick up a pencil and start drawing. It was just paper and pencils how it started. And just wanted to I wanted that as part of my world, and been very blessed that I've been able to maintain that.
Now, were there other people in your family that were artists as well, or this was kind of your own thing that you just kind of glommed onto and you decided this is it?
Yeah, my older brother Pat Patrocinio was his real name. He was also very intrigued with the arts, so we used to actually spend a lot of afternoons, weekends drawing. Just sit in a room with a sketch pad and draw. Probably not a sketch pad. It was probably a big Chief tablet.
Oh yeah,
right. And some number 2 pencil. We just spent hours doing it. We just absolutely loved it. We started to create our own little world. We, in fact, this was in this, I would say, mid 70s. And, we were very much interested in collecting comic books. So we'd come home with comic books, and then we'd try to redraw what we saw in the comic books. And then we started creating our own characters. And we actually we got enough money together to buy typing paper, and we folded the typing paper in half and would do a cover of the comic book and then do a whole illustrated sort of comic in this folded typing paper sheet, and then we'd staple it together, and that was our issue 1 of the comic book character. And that was what my brother and I loved to do together.
That's really cool. That sounds like a really neat shared experience. So does he still produce art himself?
He unfortunately passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
Passed away back in the 90s. He passed away from AIDS.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Thank you. No, he was sculpting and very creative person. And I think if he was alive today, we would have, continued to do a lot of things together. Yeah.
So what brought you to Colorado then from New Mexico? Because I love New Mexico. That is definitely at the top of my list of states that I love the Las Vegas area.
Oh, okay.
I've spent a fair amount of time in Albuquerque, and then Silver City, New Mexico is another one of my favorite places.
Yeah. My mom's from Las Vegas. She was raised in Las Vegas. Her grandfather used to, the town Wagon Mound?
I don't know that I've ever been there, but I know of it. Yeah.
it's a small, I mean, when you're going down I-25 headed to Las Vegas, it's a blip on the road, but it's, my great grandfather had a bean farm. They used to grow pinto beans out in the area, and he did that for a number of years. So she was raised in that, she was born in Las Vegas, but was raised in Wagon Mountain area until about her high school years. And then they moved to Albuquerque, where she met my dad. But what brought me to Colorado was, as I just continued to love the arts and pursue it through high school. I was very fortunate to have an art teacher who was very influential. He's still alive, a guy named Frank McCulloch. In fact, he's the New Mexico PBS has done a couple shows on his life. So it's interesting, but he was just an inspiring teacher, and he would take, he brought in old black and white films for us to watch. He would take us out to visit artist studios in the Albuquerque area. As a high schooler, we were lucky to visit one artist was a guy named Raymond Johnson.
I'm familiar with him.
The Denver Art Museum has a couple of his works.
Okay.
Frank's actually was connected with the Tamron Art Institute, which I think they're based out of California, but then they opened up a place in Albuquerque, and they're known for their stone lithography. So he brought in a lithography studio, and it was the only one in New Mexico. So we had access to doing that process, which was really fascinating. So he really was a teacher that kind of put his heart into, his teaching and cultivating the students. And so I knew by the time I was probably in at least 10th grade that I wanted to pursue some sort of creative life, and just didn't know. I had never met any professional artists, had no connection. So like, what do you do, right? What does one do? You want to go this way. It's like, I had no clue. So I was very fortunate that one of the students from my high school, who was a year ahead of me, had moved to Denver and started attending the Colorado Institute of Art, which is a graphic design school. And he came back the year I was a senior with his portfolio. It was great. It's like, oh, look, I'm doing these drawings and brochures and logos and illustrations. Like, wow, you can do that and make money? Okay, sign me up. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Colorado Institute of Art.
That's actually where I went to school for photography.
Oh, you really? Okay,
yeah.
Very cool. So there you go. We got a connection. So what year were you there, Todd?
I was there from 94, 95 to 97 is when I graduated.
Okay. Cool. Was it when they were on Broadway, or were they on Grant still?
They were on Grant still. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. So that's what brought me to Denver, to attend that school. And this was in 1979 when I moved to Denver, and started school in 1980. And it was on Grant at that time, with the goal of just, let me go, let me follow this road, see where it takes me. And because it was something in the creative world, I was still drawing like I did as a kid on the side. I've always done that, but pursued the graphic design. I thought this was a practical way of kind of getting into the arts and making a living. So I ended up graduating from the Colorado Institute of Art in 1983, and got right into a graphic design job. In fact, we had our graduation ceremony on Friday, and I was hired, I think, that same day by a company. And then over the weekend, I had a logo design I had to do.
Wow.
And so Monday, I showed up to work at this, it was a new computer firm out in Lakewood. And so I started doing graphic design for them. That got me started in that realm, but all along just continuing to draw and not really paint, because I wasn't pursuing it that much. I worked with this company in Lakewood for about a year, and then eventually got laid off. Their portion of the design firm wasn't quite working, so they laid us off. But in fact, I met this really great photographer. We used to go out and photograph works. He would take me to a photography studio. It was right by the Denver Art Museum. Maybe you know who I'm talking about. Guy had a lot of black and white photography. I can't think of his name right now, but I'll look it up for you.
Hal Gold?
Yes.
Yeah. He had Camera Obscura.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Phenomenal.
Place. Yeah.
You do that place?
Yeah.
I almost shed a tear every time I drive past there these days. Because
in fact, we were there not too long ago when we went to the Kirkland Museum. We talked because we walked right by it, and we were talking about that. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, that was what an inspiring space to go in, and so I was able to see it through the eyes of this photographer who was working in our firm, and he was I remember he would bring in these books. Ansel Adams had this, I think they were like a value system series of
zone
books.
System, yeah.
Zone system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was very cool. So to see that. But so after I left this design firm, I started freelancing, and and this is what I think about the arts. We talked about, when you follow something that you love, things just kind of happen in an organic way. I went to this gentleman's house. He was going to hire me to do an illustration job for United Airlines. And I walk in, and he's got this wonderful collection of fine art, and he just saw me. I was about 23 at the time. And just, he could tell I was enamored with the art more than anything else. And so he started telling me about the different artists. Oh yeah, this artist lives here in Denver, and this artist is so-and-so. And I had no clue who they were, but eventually I got to become very good friends with this gentleman. And he started taking me to the art studios and introducing me to the fine arts. And that kind of opened the doors to the fine art world for me. So very fortunate in that regard.
Yeah, that's cool, man. I mean, that whole story, the way that it has all transpired up to that point is that's pretty phenomenal.
I feel very lucky that it's kind of worked out that way. It always feels, and I've always felt this way, that if you just kind of pursue that thing that's in your heart and you love, somehow things will find their way to you, or you find your way to them, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as long as we're doing that, things will work out okay. I'm not saying it's going to be great, but it'll work out okay.
It's funny that you say that, because even though we're in this weird space right now with what's going on with this pandemic, and I know it's affecting a lot of artists, and maybe because I've done it for so long as a freelancer, it's not that I'm not concerned, but I'm not freaking out, I guess. I've been in a funk at times, but deep down inside, I feel like it's going to be fine. Like, I'm going to figure this out. Yeah. Do you have that same feeling? I mean,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's this is definitely different. This is unique. There's never been anything quite like this. And the art world's always sort of evolving and changing, and can be very challenging to navigate. This is going to be an interesting new time, I think, a new era, and I think it's going to create some different ways of looking at things. I think the artists come out to start, kind of this brings out sort of a creative element, even if it's based out of anger or out of, unknowing. I think that sometimes can do things in the art world. So I definitely, I'm not saying I'm anxious to see what's going to happen, but I think there'll be some interesting things that happen in the creative world because of all this.
I think you're right, because we live in a very tumultuous time. I believe that I think we're going to see somewhat of a renaissance. I think we're going to, from people being isolated to like when things, whatever normal looks like, being able to have that freedom again. I think you're going to see a lot of inspiration and a lot of like phenomenal art come out of this.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think it'll be a catalyst for that.
Yeah, there's this artist I seen on CBS this morning when I was watching the news, getting ready for work, and his name is Kadir Nelson, and he has this painting, a lot of different faces, different nationalities, and they're all looking at one point. And he was talking about wanting to inspire hope instead of fear. Right, and so it's already kind of happening. And then the craziness of like YouTube or TikTok, where people are recreating famous works of art in their own little way, in their own little space. So, I mean, it's already kind of working with, the creative juices flowing, because I think that's awesome. But I'm really looking forward to see how we start as artists interpreting this time and what we're going through now in their art. Because like you said, I think there's going to be this push for creativity, and it'll be interesting to see.
I think so. And I think the people will want to see what writers and artists and musicians and people such as yourself, what they have to say about it too, even as it passes and moves forward. We're going to want to hear the experiences. I could see music being written about this time. It's definitely will be interesting, I think.
Yeah. It's going to shake things up a bit, And the other way I was kind of looking at it too is like being in isolation, like we are, even though we have the ability to move around and do certain things. A lot of people not being used to it. I think it's analogous to like when you travel, like, when you kind of when you travel to someplace new from your regular space, your eyes kind of open. I'm sure you've experienced that when you go someplace completely different and you're experiencing a different culture or a different landscape. It really it kind of gets those creative juices flowing and it's inspiring.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's good to see something new and different. I know as a landscape painter, it's important for me to kind of travel around a lot and see new things. And I really learn a lot by kind of that comparing and contrast. So, we moved in the late 90s, we moved from Colorado. My family moved to Oregon, to Eugene, Oregon.
Oh, wow.
I lived there for 5 years. And, here I was, who pretty much grew up in the Southwest, kind of arid country, and, Colorado's semi-arid, to this area where it rains 120 inches a year. And that I learned to paint the desert. I learned to see the desert with fresh eyes because I was around it and saw it every day. And by kind of removing myself from it and living in the Pacific Northwest, where it was green and lush and wet, I started to really see what the desert was all about. And that's when I really first saw the desert for the first time. And I was in my early 40s when we moved back to Colorado, and it was like, wow, okay, now I see it.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's good. That change gives you a different perspective.
That's really neat. That's a cool experience that you just related, moving back, and then you see it with totally different perspective and eyes, so. Yeah.
Like Wes, seeing your state of Dakota, must see it in a different way as well.
Yeah. Cause I spent 10 years in Marine Corps, so I traveled around quite a bit, different countries and stuff, but, and when you're, and Todd will know this, but when you're by the Missouri River by Fort Pierre and Pierre, it's pretty bland, rolling hills, but there's no trees. It's land, it's just flat. But I find it has its own beauty to it that is different than like Southern Utah that I love, and Colorado and the mountains. you just got to look, like you said, you got to kind of look at it with fresh eyes, and you realize that, when the wind is blowing and the buffalo grass is moving, it just has a beauty to its own, where somebody who's been there all their life will be like, oh, this place is ugly, or,
Right.
just never, or they come from the East Coast with tons of trees and they're like, oh my God, this freaks me out because it's so wide open. But you just gotta, I think you're right on. If you go away and then come back, you have a new perspective of what you probably didn't see before.
Yeah. It's I do a lot of travel with my workshops. I teach plein air workshops. And so I've been asked to teach these outdoor painting workshops throughout the country. And it's always fascinating because I'll get asked to, come up to Vermont and show us how you paint. It's like, well, I'm a desert rat. What am I going to show you? But you go there. It's like, I don't think I've ever seen a place. I've not been to a place where I thought there wasn't beauty.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the questions when I was looking at your website, and there was a couple images of you painting and you call it plein air painting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So can you talk about just a little bit about the process of, like, you set up your paints, and so, like, picking and then in one of your videos you mentioned thumbnails, doing a quick thumbnail sketch for composition. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I got into plein air painting, after I started pursuing the fine arts, and kind of settled in on the idea of doing landscape more than early on. I was doing more portrait work.
Okay.
And the advice I got, because one of the first things when I switched to doing landscape, I wanted to learn from the best painters I could find. So I started taking classes and workshops from artists that I found inspiration from. And they all said, you got to go outside. You got to, one artist said, you're only as good as your reference. And, that is from life, right? It's from life. And so that led me to go buy a French easel and head out to the hills and start painting. And I had been painting for 10 years at that point before I went outdoors and did my first plein air. And when I set up to paint, it felt like I'd never painted before in my life. There was so much I needed to know.
Wow.
Such an enormous learning curve. And, but it's a way, I look at it this way. I go outside to paint as a way, like earlier we were talking about, when we have an opportunity to kind of converse and get to know each other. That's what you're doing when you're outdoors painting. You're with nature. You're kind of, nature's telling you, hey, trees this color, sky's this color, the grass is blowing, and you sort of translate it in your way. And so it's a way of communicating. And the more you do that, the more you start to sort of understand and start to kind of fall in love with nature even more so. So I see the words, their wisdom in the artist saying, go out and paint from life. And so I got, pretty serious about doing it and started going out as often as possible, and met a lot of great artists that way, and took a lot of great trips to just stand in front of nature and set up the easel. And a lot of them were pretty bad paintings, really bad. And that's part of it. I mean, you learn, I think I learned more from those ones that just completely crapped out than the ones that worked out. And it just, think about it, just stand in front of something for an hour to 2 hours and just really look. It gives us that opportunity to kind of slow down and take it in, which, is a kind of a luxury nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and Michael Untied talked about when he goes, and the importance of going out instead of just taking a photograph is like you get all the senses. You smell, you hear, you can taste it almost, and yes. It just gives a different, I guess, experience when you use all your senses, and it can translate to your canvas.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I mean that's a big part of it too. As painters, we're visual, but this gives us that opportunity to definitely, you feel the heat. You talked about Southern Utah, painted there, and when you're out in the desert and that you feel that heat, it gets into your, it gets into your whole being, and you put that in the painting somehow. And when you feel, I love painting winter scenes. When you're out there and you're freezing, that's getting into it too, and it kind of translates to what kind of colors you would use. How do you express, I'm just shaking with cold. How do I express that with just pigment? And, basically it's a piece of board with some paint on it. But it definitely gets into the system. And I think it helps one understand that more. And I think it also, the more you do it, you sort of kind of memorize it and absorb it. And then when you are in the studio working from a photographic reference, which I do often, you can kind of relive that experience and kind of reintroduce that idea and those feelings back into the painting.
So what does a regular day look like for you? Are you in your studio every day painting? How does your weeks work?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's it's varies so much, but I would say if I'm home, typically we talked earlier, I'm an early riser, and usually I like to kind of get the business part out of the way. It just kind of clears my mind. So that's my chance to send photos or email, or maybe update my Facebook, social media, which is part of the marketing now. And so that gives me that opportunity to kind of get that done first thing in the morning, kind of get it out of my system. And then I would say by 9 o'clock, I'm free, kind of free to roam. I could go outdoors to paint if I want, take a hike, go out and photograph, get in the studio, put up a canvas or piece of pastel paper and start working on something. And then I'm so used to now my wife, we have our own evening time together. So by 5 o'clock, I'm sort of done. Or in the early days, I was not that way. I would be up till 1 o'clock in the morning painting, or later. But nowadays I tend to kind of keep a,
pretty
9 to 5 schedule. Yeah, pretty much. Unless I'm out on the road on a plein air trip, then the schedule is 24/7. I'm out first light. I want to get that first sunlight coming up. I might be out till the sunset because it's inspiring. And then you finish a sunset and the moon starts to rise and you're like, I got to paint that, so that's a little different experience. So those plein air experiences really are kind of the whole day is that focus.
Yeah.
So how many?
Go ahead, Todd.
We do this all the time. We share the same brain sometimes.
That's good.
So how much do you travel during the course of a year typically? I know this is kind of changed probably a little bit this year, but yeah. What is the ratio of traveling and painting to being in your studio and painting at home?
Probably 3 months of travel, 3 months a year of travel. Yeah, and the rest of the time in the studio, at home, my home studio. So part of that is I teach these plein air workshops. So that takes me to places to teach, but then I also may stay a few days before or after to paint on my own. So that's a great way of kind of building in a plein air trip with also making some money on the road.
Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a good position to be in with these trips. So when you're actually teaching the painting to these other folks, how large of a class is that you're teaching typically?
They can vary in size, but plein air, I've kind of come to find that a class of 15 is ideal. I've had larger classes, and you're sort of putting out fires from person to person, kind of, so to speak. And it ends up being where you really are, it's just hard to time manage that many people.
Yeah, I'm
because
sure.
in plein air, you're set up in a spot, and I like to go paint nature. So we tend to typically go out to fields that are open. So the people kind of tend to, as much as I try to say, let everyone kind of stay together, then as soon as you say that, they scatter like, just they scatter all over the woods. So it takes, it's demanding to kind of roam around and help them at their easel.
I was looking at one of your photographs of you out there, and what was funny is a lot of them had umbrellas, so you could see all these umbrellas. And it was just, and you're right, they were all like spread out under this in the area, so that I can see that's a workout.
They do. It's funny because it's they'll and some people like to or tend to be shy, so they want to hide, so they kind of go behind some bush, and I just don't see them. And at the end of the day, like, how come you never came to see me? How come you never came to see me? It's like I couldn't find you. We're tomorrow, shout out, let me know where you're at. So
how many days are your courses generally?
They typically used to be 5 days, but anymore the courses are 4 days. Now they're dropping to 3 days. I don't know if the attention span's kind of getting smaller, but it's for people that don't do it a lot. It's an exhausting experience because you're out there painting from 9 to 5, and if you're not doing it on a regular basis, it's physically demanding. So by the end of 5 days, people are sort of ready for that margarita, a glass of wine. So,
are they different levels? I mean, do you have some beginners, or do you have kind of like, okay, I want you to have a basic knowledge, and so the experience level of your art, or do you break them up by workshop?
I typically, I would say most workshops, there's kind of a mix, unless I specifically set it up as an advanced workshop where you get more advanced level. So, and that's fine. I've gotten used to working with different levels. Somebody who's been painting 10 years and wants to just, they've been doing it and they want to get better. They want to kind of tweak their skills, to the person that, you come up to them. It's like, how do you open this paint tube? I've never opened a paint tube.
That would be me.
So that's a challenge if they're that new. But it's also their enthusiasm's there, so it's fun to have all sorts of levels together.
That's really cool. I mean, it's got to be inspiring, especially for the people attending it, just to see what other people are doing. And I assume you do some kind of critique of some sort, or a question and answer type of thing at the end of the day, or at the end of the series?
Yeah, usually towards the end of the week, we sort of gather together and everyone shows their works. So imagine you've got 15 people and they're each doing 2 to 3 works. So, at the end of the week, you've got, 40, 50 works. And I remember I was in this workshop and we were indoors and we had set out all our paintings for a critique. And this was kind of in a public area, this workshop building, but someone walked in who wasn't, I guess they might've been lost or something. They walked in and they saw all these paintings. They're like, what is this, painting sweatshop? And I love that because it was like, yeah, that's it feels like that at the end of the week. You've really produced a lot and there's a lot of work that's been done, and I think people are excited by that output. But so then we do a critique. That's probably not my favorite part of the workshop, but I know people enjoy that aspect of it. I've gotten better about my critiquing. It's definitely all about not a critique as much as this is a showing you what you've done well and what you could improve on. Kind of a good balance for everyone. So it's it makes it easy. to kind of get through those critiques.
Sure. Yeah. So it's not like art school where you make people cry.
Exactly. Right. More. They used to call them the ego sandwich, right? Two positives with a good slice of the negative in there.
Right.
And I think that's helpful for most. I think, and I was lucky. Oh, wait, it's 8:00, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys been helling at the moon?
No, huh?
No.
Okay, I got to open the door. This is so cool. So where I live, I don't know if you could hear this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God. That's funny.
My dog's starting to growl in the background now.
Oh. So they've been doing this 8:00 sharp every night, and it's throughout the Denver metro area, and they're doing this to honor the people who are working in the hospitals, and during this, and so people will shoot off fireworks, and then people will start howling out their windows. And
oh, that's funny.
They've been doing that in my neighborhood too. Actually, I have gone out. I haven't. I guess I lied. I did howl one night.
Oh,
and
good.
It varies. It varies.
That was
from
like 3 months ago.
What's that?
It varies from night to night how active people are. But yeah, that same thing in my neighborhood. And then the fireworks have been a new thing in our neighborhood. So
yeah,
all of a sudden there's a lot of fireworks. So
right, that's kind of when we know it's 8:00, because you'll hear that first one, and it's 8:00 on the nose, and then they only hell for about a minute, and it's over.
Oh,
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I seen a commercial where people were pounding pots and pans. I'll take the howling any day over the pots and pans. And up here, we're pretty quiet. Nobody's doing anything at night, but maybe I'll start howling tomorrow night and see if anybody picks it up. They'll probably call the ambulance and come and get me and take me to. I just lost it.
You totally threw me off though, because I thought you were like 8:00. All right. Either you were going to tell me you had to go, or you're like, is that the end of our interview?
Oh, no.
So I forgot about the howling. So when you said that, I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking, God, if we go till 8, this will be perfect.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that.
You heard it.
Oh, right? Yeah, I could hear it. Yeah.
Good. Yeah,
At first, I thought it was dogs, but then I realized, no, those are humans doing that.
Yeah, it's really and every night.
That's awesome.
And it's it's a communal thing with, everyone's kind of howling from their. I live in a suburb, so they're all sort of howling from their little homes around us here.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like it. That's fun.
You're not doing that in South Dakota yet?
No, I haven't heard any howling. Maybe I'll start going out at 8 and see if there's any.
You should start the trend.
Well, that's what I said. They might come and arrest me and take me to the rubber room or whatever, but we might give it a try. We'll see. But I haven't even really heard about that. I mean, I've heard of people making noise honoring, but I never heard anything about the howling. So do you know how it got started, or did you start this trend?
No, I first heard about it through my son's wife. They live up in Loveland. Oh. And she posted on Facebook something about howl at the moon. And I think it was someone in the Colorado area that started this. And I don't know if it's much beyond Colorado, but they definitely are doing it throughout the city of Denver and up the Front Range.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. No, I like that.
Yeah, and it's been about 2 weeks now that they do every night at 8:00. It's.
I like it. So I got now going back to art. Can we back up a little bit?
Sure.
I'm curious to know what made you, or because you said you were doing portraits originally. So what was your progression to doing landscapes? Is that just, did you meet the right artist and you're like, I like this, and did your first plein air and you were hooked, or how did that all transpire?
Yeah. So the portraits sort of just growing up, I was fascinated with people's faces. And so I started doing portraits very early on. In high school, I was doing them. So I kind of saw myself going in that way. You know, I wanted to continue painting the human form while working as a graphic designer. So as I mentioned, I met this gentleman who was had this art collection. He started taking me around to visit different artists. And that opened the door to a gentleman by the name of Paul Cotney, who was a Denver artist who no longer is living, but he was quite a mentor, really interesting guy. He, was an architect back in Germany. He was had been part of the Nazi youth, and it was just, fascinating character. And I would go visit him once a month, and he would critique my work. And in fact, he was the guy that I first learned my idea about critiquing, because he would I'd say, come on, Paul, tell me really what you think of this. He said, well, Lorenzo, no artist ever painted good if they were feeling bad. So he always was kind of encouraging in his critiques. And I always remembered that was a lot more helpful than him saying, oh God, throw that away, start over. Oh. But through his connection, I'm kind of going a long way about it. I did a lot more portrait works, and he offered to do a show for me. He had a home in Cherry Hills, and he's done this for a number of artists. While he was living, he would say, yeah, let me host a show for you. He had built this home kind of built around a ballet studio. His wife was a ballerina. She taught ballet, and so he built a ballet studio, essentially a ballet studio with a house around it. So he had this big space that he could draw a curtain, it was all mirrored dance floor, but he could draw a curtain and hang artwork. And so his way of getting artists to take it seriously, he would say, well, we'll do this show for you. I want you to do 60 paintings in 6 months, and we'll do a show. And, if you've never done it, it was like, wow, okay, 60 works. So I better get cranking, get started. And every month I would bring kind of what I've been working in, and he would say, this is working, this is not, set that aside. He introduced me to a framer, and which I'd never had to get my works framed. And then we had to get ready for the opening. So I had to go out and learn how to work with a printer and get an invite made and take photos of the art. And so it was kind of a big lesson in how to host a one-person show. But we had this show, and knock on wood, it was a good selling show. I sold about half of those 60 works.
Wow, that's impressive.
And the fun part was you met Dolores. Todd got to meet Dolores, my wife. We've been together 35 years, but I had that show the night before our marriage. So in essence, that was kind of my bachelor party, the one-man show. Unfortunately, knock on wood, it went well. She might have changed her mind, but it went well. And but because of that show, a gallery owner in Denver, the gallery named D. Coloris, came to the show and purchased some of my portrait works, and they invited me to start showing in that gallery. And that was my very first professional gallery. And I was 25 at the time. And so I was doing a lot more portrait type work, and kind of saw my career going in that direction. Now I got to back up a couple years now. I just remembered something I got to back up. I was, to try to sell some of my work, I would take my works to, you talked about the Cherry Hills Festival, but there was a show called the People's Fair. I don't know if you've ever been to the People's Fair in Denver.
Yeah.
But it used to be at East High School. This was in the mid 80s. And they had a lot more fine arts in it at the time. So I would rent a booth and show my drawings of people. And this gentleman came into my booth and kind of walked around and really looked at my work very closely. He handed me a business card when he was kind of done looking. He said, I'm an artist, and I'd love to have you come visit me at my studio. Guy's name was Ramon Kelly. You know his name? Ramon Kelly.
Yeah. We haven't interviewed him, but
he's a must.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely an icon. And I had no clue who this gentleman was, but went to his home, took my portfolio, and he was living in the Denver Country Club area. So he had this beautiful home and this beautiful studio that he had built in their kind of the carriage house of the home. And wow, that was an eye opener to see how a successful artist lives. So needless to say, I became completely enamored with his work, his style, to the point where I was replicating it. I just thought I've got to do what he's doing. And some of my early shows at this gallery I mentioned, De Coloris, I'd get complimented. Boy, your work is you're going to be the next Ramon Kelly, and your work is, oh God, that reminds me of Ramon Kelly, and you're going to be the. And then I remember hearing it just one too many times. And I thought, oh man, I am going down a dead end road, and I'm going to hit a brick wall. So at that time I was kind of looking around for something different too, and that's when landscape kind of happened. And I was again very fortunate at that time to meet this young artist who had just moved from Chicago to the Denver area. And he started showing at the same gallery, and he invited me to go out and paint, plein air paint. And that was my very first experience that I talked about earlier. And that kind of really, after getting out there and seeing how badly I did at it, I was sort of one of these guys, like, I'll show them, I'm going to prove that I can paint these landscapes. So that led me to take classes and I just completely shifted gears. I went from doing portraits to doing nothing but landscape. And I did that and still have done that since. That was like in the late 80s. And that's what got me started in landscape, essentially.
So do you think your portrait work benefited your landscaping later? That did it, or is it just so different that it really doesn't relate?
It relates once you've sort of kind of played around with the two for a while. At first, I didn't see that because, portrait work, you're close to someone. They stand still. The lighting's consistent. And it's that kind of experience where landscape, the light's moving, the wind's blowing, the coyotes are howling. It's just it's more alive. It definitely is a moving, I like to tell people who take my classes in landscape, if they've never painted landscape and they come from portrait, I said, just imagine if you set up a model and every 5 minutes you move the light source,
Yeah.
And that's that's a big difference between the two. And so you have to kind of learn to chase the light with landscape, where portrait was more of an act and just replicating what you saw, and everything was consistent. And the model can take its same place, where the landscape, you're painting and a rainstorm comes through and it's throwing curves at you all the time. So that was sort of the shift to, and I found that extremely exciting to be in that environment where it was like that, where there is no safety net with plein air painting. It is a sport for sure.
Much like hunting.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're chasing the light. Yeah. I do landscape photography. So obviously I'm taken with your stuff that way too, and it is, especially with photography, because it's all about light. but chasing the light and how the shadows play off different textures of the wall, or, like a stone wall or something. It's really fun to know. So I have another question, and it kind of relates to when I'm out shooting, I'm always struggling with, what am I trying to say here? And is that a fair question? Like when you're painting, like the picture behind you with the tree and you're in the wash, are you looking, do you ask yourself, or do you just see this and now I'm thinking about composition, but do you ask yourself, what am I trying to say here? Is there supposed to be some kind of, I don't know, story, not necessarily a narrative, but, a meaning behind it?
Yeah, that's a good question, Wes. It's, I think with plein air painting, it tends to be, maybe you're this way with the photography. You're just captured by the quality of the light or the atmosphere that what was happening that day, and that becomes the inspiration. And that's exactly what it's like with plein air. It's suddenly you see something, it's like, I got to paint that. And maybe while you're painting it, then the narrative takes place and the story starts to become part of the process. But initially it's just that, you could be driving around and then you got to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
It's like, that's it. I got to paint that. And you jump out and you set up your gear and you do it. Then as you're set up, you're like, this is okay. This is, it's about the warm and cool relationship, or the heat of that day, or the cold, or maybe it's the wind blowing, and that becomes part of the story. Yeah.
Because I've looked at a lot of, it's mostly photography in this realm. Usually paintings, I don't question myself, probably because I'm not a painter. But I do. Sometimes I look at landscape stuff and I'll look at it and it just doesn't speak to me. So I'm like, what do they want me to convey here? Or, from their photograph. And sometimes, so then I start to internalize that, I think, in my own work, that I start to feel like, okay, what am I saying? Is it just, is it a mess, or what am I trying to say here? And I think I get kind of hung up on that. In fact, we had another artist, Georgia Amar. She said, she goes, we can do a show, but you need to be bold. And I've been telling Todd this, I've been struggling with that meaning. What does it mean to be bold when it comes to as a photographer? I mean, I've seen bold photography, but let's say Helmut Newton or, Robert Mapplethorpe, he could be bold and sometimes in a very uncomfortable way. And I don't want to be that. And I don't know if my stuff is bold. So I've been wrestling with that story. So anyway, so I was wondering, because once again, this connection between landscape, if you had that same thought, but maybe, your composition is phenomenal. I'm looking at Prairie Sundown, and it's real. I wouldn't say plain is the wrong word, but there's something about it that, maybe it's the warmth of the sun setting, or that it really just makes you feel like you can feel something out of it. And so, anyway, I don't know if that's a fair question, but I was just kind of curious what your perspective of that was. So.
Yeah, well, the story behind that work is I was out with an artist friend who lives in Kansas, in Downs, Kansas. And I spent a couple of days with him. We painted around that area of Downs, Kansas. I had never been there. I don't know. Have you guys been there?
My family comes from Coldwater, Kansas, south central Kansas. So my dad grew up there. So I'm familiar with the area, but not, specifically that. But
yeah. He's I'd never been there, so it was new, and he kind of took me around the cornfields, and I think that's what that was. And we happened to be out there right at sunset, so we set up, kind of excited by that thing we talked about. It was like, look at that, we've got to paint that. A totally new area, and I really can't say, I could invest a lot in Kansas because it's not part of my daily life or experience, but seeing it through his eyes, he took me around quite a bit and showed me places that he's been inspired by. So it kind of grew to love it in that short time I was with him. But that's kind of how a lot of the art happens when I'm outside of areas that are kind of what I would say the areas I'm comfortable with. And I find as an artist, it's good to explore new territory, But to me, I really love places I like to think of as home. Colorado, New Mexico, to me, those two are home. It's where I've lived most of my life, and where you see things on a day-to-day basis. I think you see things on a different level, a more intimate level than when it's a new environment. And I really like my experiences when I can kind of revisit spots over and over again. I love that. Different seasons. I'll go paint the same tree 20 times, different times a year, different times a day, seasons. And it's just fascinating to kind of get to know that subject that well. So I don't know if this is answering the question, but it kind of relates to the idea of being, being immersed in a specific landscape that one loves is I think important for an artist. But then those new experiences are just as valid and as important. If anything, it teaches you what to do in the environment best. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. Yeah.
So outside of Colorado and New Mexico, where are some of the other places that you really love to go to paint?
Well, Utah is definitely up there on that list. It's Utah's, I love that red rock country. It's just absolutely beautiful. Speaks to me in a way, and I don't know where that comes from, but it just really speaks to me. I think northern Arizona for me is very inspiring, more than southern Arizona. The Sonoran Desert, which is southern Arizona, is where the saguaros are. It's a lot greener. I tend to like that red rock country more. Mm-hmm. So anywhere northern Arizona is great. As far as completely west, the Oregon coast is the best coastline in America. Incredible coastline.
I agree with you there. I love Oregon. I love the Oregon coastline.
Yeah, it's got a starkness, a rawness that is different than any other coastline I've been to across America. So I'm drawn to that. I guess I like, I think about that idea you're talking about, the dry wash. I think I'm drawn to places where there's a lot of erosion.
Sure.
A lot, the elements eroding things. I don't know if there's some sort of story behind that, but I find those two elements come together in a very intriguing way. I love dry washes where, you go one year to paint a spot and you go back the next year to the same spot and it's changed because of the, what happened during that year with the water that flew through it.
Yeah.
And so, just show me that kind of the bare bone earth and I'm happy.
Yeah, no, I can. And it speaks, like I said, your artwork speaks that. I think you capture something, you walk away, like in Pacific View, it looks like it's probably a sunset and the bright reds, and then you got the flowing water. It even though it's just landscape, it says something, it really kind of speaks to me anyway. I like that. Just beautiful.
Thank you. One artist that I think is one of my favorites, he's a Russian artist by the name of Isaac Levitan, who lived back in the turn of the century. He only lived to be 40, but he kind of, he was one of the first artists I saw that just went out and painted everyday subjects, kind of everyday scenes. He would go out and paint a field or a pile of hay, could take the very common everyday thing and make poetry out of it. And I always thought that was beautiful in my eyes. Prior to seeing his works, I was exposed to the greats like Albert Bierstadt, Frederick Church. These guys would go to these dramatic spots, and I often tell my students, they would go and they'd have to go to the Grand Canyon at sunset with a rainbow, you know, just some rainstorm, and it was this sort of over the top dramatic scene. And so I searched for, in early years, that's kind of what I went for. I'd go try to find the most beautiful, grandiose scene until I discovered Leviton's work. And it was like, no, you could just paint your backyard, you know, that field that's right behind, you know, behind you, that's got all the beauty one needs. And I fell in love with that idea of that, you know, sort of that ordinary, unspectacular beauty had a poetry and beauty all its own.
So a couple of my favorites off your website. I love Cloud and Mesa. Where was that painted at?
Let's see if I can remember that painting, for one.
And then the other one was Wild Country.
Wild Country. Okay. I think Cloud and Mesa is from the Utah area as well. In Wild Country, you know, I've got to.
I'm sure it becomes a blur after a while.
Right.
Those are like just struck me, the colors and I don't know, it's just beautiful. Your use of the way that you're able to paint light and capture it, I think is fantastic.
Thank you. I think I'm remembering Wild Country. Is it the one with the rocks and the pillars of rock? Is that?
So
can you show it
There's
to me?
it's kind of like steeples.
Yeah, it's very graphic. It has one like really.
You're in a wash. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Few rock formations, but one that's very prominent, kind of in the middle ground. And
yeah. Let me show
graphic.
you something. I think I've got. It's funny. I happen to just have that one handy. So this was a field study I did.
Yeah. I think that's it right there. Yeah.
Yeah. This
just
was
a different
done,
perspective.
Yeah, this is in Arches in Utah.
Okay.
And this was kind of one of the honest spotters that I'm talking about, the plein air. I was out there with a painting buddy of mine, Gerald Fritzler, who lives out in Grand Junction. And that was the kind of the idea that sparked Wild Country.
Okay.
And Wild Country, I believe, is a larger pastel, something like a 16 by 30 or something along
16 by 22.
Yeah. But that's the sketch, and so that was definitely from one of those trips, one of the plein air trips. You know, and sometimes I go alone, but sometimes I go with a couple painting buddies, and that makes it fun. You just kind of explore a country, and basically you're just painting, eating, and sleeping.
Right. Todd and I, every now and then, we'll get together and do what I like to call Wes and Todd's Wild Adventure. We'll get together and go shoot somewhere. I'll take him up here, or we'll go down to Colorado and just go out and shoot. We haven't done that in a while, but you know, it's fun to share that kind of experience instead of just doing it by yourself.
Yeah. So you take your cameras out, and what kind of terrain do you like to shoot? Well,
we did Devil's Tower one time, and then down to the Badlands and up in the mountains in Colorado, up by Leadville, I think. And
nice.
It's, you know, we haven't done it, but maybe 3-4 times, but it's, you know, it's just, you know, he's more of a portrait guy, and then I do mostly landscapes. But so just to go out, and plus, you know, you're friends and you're hanging out and you're telling stories, and I totally get that. So that'd be a blast.
Yeah. That is one of the joys of going out, you know, with a group of artists and painting, and, you know, just kind of being inspired, and you're sort of feeding off each other. You know, you might be, look at this, look at that, you know, and then the conversations go all night, and it could be about arts or, you know, who knows what, but it's definitely an inspiring time.
So one of the things that Michael Untied said, like, he'll do these little character studies out in the field, like what you just showed us. And then he'll like slowly paint them bigger and bigger and bigger. And he says that, you know, that practice of repeating that same paint, even though it's getting bigger, just like it makes it better and better. Do you do stuff like that? Obviously you come back and then paint these larger ones. So
exactly. Yeah. So a lot of the plein air works are small in size, just because of the nature of plein air painting. It's, you know, at most you have about an hour and a half, because the light, after an hour and a half, the lights change so much that it's no longer the same scene. And if one is really tuned in, like Monet thought the light after 15 minutes was no longer the same.
Yeah.
And that's what got him started on that series. You know, he would go out and take 6-7 canvases, and after 15 minutes, he would switch canvas and set up another canvas because his eye was that tuned in to color and the changes. But an hour and a half, I find, is about kind of where after that, you're just kind of making it up.
Right. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I can pull out a group of sketches, I'll show you kind of what I do here. This is kind of 9 by 12, 10 by 12. Here, I don't know if you can see this. Yep. This is up by Dylan.
Okay. Yeah.
This is Halett's Peak. I don't know if you're seeing these okay.
Yeah.
This is one of those real simple scenes. This is just some pinon trees at the base of the Sandias in the Albuquerque area. They're rough. The sketches are not meant to be fully finished. They're more sort of abbreviated, quick little studies.
Mm-hmm.
This was up by Breckenridge. This is up in the Bighorn Mountains of
that's awesome.
Wyoming.
Oh, Wyoming, yeah.
Yeah, and this is in the San Juans here.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
So this is kind of typical what I do with oil. A couple more. I don't know if you're seeing them.
Yeah. No, they're fantastic.
So they become sort of a great resource because, I look at it as like it's our first hand look at things. So I'm out there, I'm mixing color as I see it, I'm putting it down, you're feeling the wind, the heat, and I feel like it's kind of, like if you're out in the field and you're taking notes of what that thing looked like at that moment, and you're jotting it down. And that's kind of what these are to me. They're note-taking moments, but in color and in value. And that's all I'm concerned with. Like, let me get that sense of what it feels like, put it down in an abbreviated way, and then, where it goes, I don't know. Sometimes it becomes a larger work. Sometimes it gets thrown out. It can vary, but it's I find just the practice of it is worth doing.
Yeah. Well, it just hones your craft. I mean, the more you're doing it, the better you get, and capturing that, like you said, capturing that moment and then coming back to it, to really, make it, I guess, more fantastic or whatever. That's a poor way of saying it, but
no, that's a great, yeah. Well, I remember we talked about this photographer friend of mine, and this was before digital, and he would go out on commercial jobs. He'd go out and do these almost like Polaroid shots,
mm-hmm. Yep.
Kind of almost like a test shot.
Yep.
And I always, later on, I kind of likened it to the plein air works. It was just a quick test to see, is this a worthy idea?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how plein air is. It's just abbreviated short thing. And is it going to work as a painting? And it might spark an idea. Sometimes it's complete painting in its own right, but but the idea of when he was doing those, it was sort of a real slowed down approach,
mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it's like now in the digital photography world, but I know I used to shoot the old 35 millimeter camera, and when you'd go on a trip, it's like, I'm down to that last roll. I gotta really make each shot count. And that's kind of how plein air kind of becomes that, because it's like I've got, you only got so much time, and you got to really make that count. So you kind of look at that area and kind of invest time before I even set up the easel to paint.
Yeah.
And I like that process. It slows the thinking down, and it kind of makes me think about what I'm going to do before I start slapping paint on the board.
Mm-hmm. Right. No. Yeah.
So let's change gears just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about the business side of what you do. You mentioned earlier social media. How have you embraced that, and how do you utilize it in your business model?
It's sort of a relatively new thing. I think I've only been doing it now 4 years, something like that. There's a part of what I do, as well as studying painting, and I've been studying books on art marketing and things like that. And so I picked up one by a lady by the name of Elson Stanfield. I believe she lives in Golden, Colorado, but so she's an art marketing coach, essentially. And one of her big things in this book was you've got to get on social media. That was kind of something she prompted her artists to do. And so my son at the time was living with me, and I asked him to help me set it up. And I was calling it Spacebook. I had no clue. Could you help me set up this Facebook thing?
That just shows our age. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, Dad, it's not Facebook, it's Facebook. Okay. Well, just show me how to do it. So it's been a really wonderful resource to, meet new clients, new artists. It's sort of a soft sell the way I approach it. I tend not to promote the sale as much, just kind of show an image or might show other things. And through that, people get to know work and possibly maybe buy it to a gallery. And I know now the shift is, I think they're going into Instagram. I haven't taken that leap yet, but I think I'm hearing more and more things about that. So I think the artist today has to be very active with their kind of promotion, on social media, with newsletters, websites. When I started, none of that existed. So that was, like us all, we've kind of had to embrace that and incorporate it. I see it now as it's actually taking, kind of takes a bigger chunk of time to do that. And so that's kind of reality in today's world with the marketing. But I find it's really nice. In fact, I got a call today from a gentleman in Santa Fe who just called to thank me for my recent post, and it was like out of the blue. It was,
oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it was really a sweet call. It's like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Well, I think that the nice thing about social media does broaden your reach to people. Like, it's, you might be just kind of going around Facebook and all of a sudden you see your stuff, and I would have never been exposed to your stuff maybe if I don't live in the Southwest at one of your galleries. So it does give you a broader audience, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys are using it for the same reason. I know you post your podcast on Facebook, and kind of the same reason. It's a great way to kind of do some outreach and you never know who's going to kind of find the page or like it or.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife actually seen a post. You evidently post like last week or something on one of our podcasts or something, or maybe liked it or something. And my wife says, "Hey, who's this?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, he's on our list to talk to. Is he pretty high up on the list of, that Todd wants to bring to this, this podcast?" So we're excited. So thanks for letting me know he was there. Cause sometimes she kind of looks at it more than I do. So
exactly. And I think I found your podcast through, I think Rose Glazier had posted her interview that you did with her. And then, cause I know Rose. And so I listened to it. It's like, wow, these guys are pretty awesome. So that was a great interview. It was just terrific.
Yeah. And she was wonderful to talk to. She, just the live wire and what she's doing, her and Krista is phenomenal. And I fell in love with some of the artists like Sophie Brown and Majestic, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I just, a big horse. I just love that painting. So, once again, doing this kind of stuff, I get exposed to a lot of artists that I wouldn't have had the pleasure to meet. But yeah, she was fun to talk to.
Exactly. Yeah. It's definitely opened up the world in a way, because we can communicate, I'm communicating with artists in foreign countries. I've traded art with artists and met collectors that way. So it's definitely got its place.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting comment. Let me ask you about that. You do some art trading with other artists that you like and respect their work?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. That's probably, we've built most of our collection based on that.
Okay.
Our home collection where it's, hey, I like your work. I like your work. Let's trade. So you work out a trade, and it's been a great way of kind of developing an art collection.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm doing a trade now currently with a lady who lives in New York City. And she does these she's been doing this series of paintings of teapots. It sounds odd, but she's just kind of from aerial perspective and just different setups with the same teapot. And they're just beautiful works. So we're going to be doing a trade here.
That's cool. That sounds interesting.
Yeah. She's a really interesting lady, and that kind of opens up friendships. And that was through Facebook. I would have never met her. I mean, I don't know how I would have ever met her without that.
So you have gallery representation. How many galleries are you in currently?
There's 5 currently.
5. Okay. And you're doing online sales as well?
I'm working with a company called Artsline, and they do online gallery sales. And he's currently running a sale of works under $5,000. So he's a gentleman who used to work at a gallery that I was repped with down in Scottsdale. So, there was some sort of connection from the gallery world to, now he moved his gallery to an online gallery. And so I think it's a new area of the market as well that I can't say it's fantastic, but I see there's potential there.
How long have you been in these galleries as a whole? Like, do you have a long relationship? I imagine for as long as you've been painting that you've been with some of these galleries for quite some time.
I try to stay, once I stick with the gallery, I'm there. They got to kick me out. They got to grab me by the neck and throw me out the door, because I tend to be pretty loyal to the galleries. But galleries have come and gone through the years. I started back in 1985 with this first gallery, and galleries have lasted 20 years, and then they decide to retire and close. So that's happened. But I would say most of the galleries I'm in now have probably been with them between 7 to 10 years.
How do you feel with this whole weird thing with the economy and the pandemic and stuff? How do you think that's going to affect galleries as a whole?
Gosh, I wish I knew. I really wish I knew. I think it's been really interesting lately. I've had a lot of conversations with our other artists about this topic, and we're all sort of like, this is new. I don't know where this will lead, how it's going to change the gallery business. There's definitely it feels like there's going to be changes, but we don't know what that is. I see, currently a lot of the shows I've been invited to or galleries are trying online sales, and that's art is such a visual thing. It's like food, you got to eat it and taste it. It's something you want to see firsthand to really get it, and so the collectors that will buy online are collectors that probably already know your work, who've already seen that or have examples in their home. But the new collector, I think, would be, unless you're Andy Warhol or so, where your name is that well known, I think they're going to want to see the physical object.
Right.
So,
well, and I was just thinking, like, I seen Pollock. Well, I took art appreciation like most college kids. I seen Pollock in art books and everything, but when I seen Jackson Pollock's actual paintings, and I was never a big fan. It's just not my thing. And my wife and she went to Rocky Mountain Arts Institute. She has a really great appreciation for art, right? And so we have these big, long conversations. Like, I feel if I can do it, it's not art, which isn't true. But when I seen Jackson Pollock's, the size of it, I mean, it was a completely different experience than seeing it online or in a book. You can appreciate it, but then when you see, these big works, you're just like blown away. Yeah.
There's just no way to replicate that. That whole experience seeing a work firsthand is got a life of its own. It's that will be the thing. I think obviously online they're trying it now because it's they want to do something just to keep the art alive for people. But I think once things go back to semi-normal, I think the galleries will, get the visitors again, because people just want to see, plus you want to meet the people, have a cocktail at the gallery opening. That's all part of that experience. And that's, I don't know how one would replicate that.
Right.
Online.
Yeah. Because I know, like, if I was to buy your art, I want to talk to you. I want to meet you. I want to, you make that, you feel like I get to know you now, that kind of deal. And I think you're more apt to sell your work if you're present at like an opening or whatever. So
I agree.
Yeah.
That relationship is really important. And we've heard that from just about every artist that we've talked to, is that those relationships mean a lot and people want that. So during this time where we're kind of stuck at home and are you doing art outreach, as my friend and our friend Bob Ragland would say? Are you doing any outreach? Are you emailing people or writing? He's a big mail guy. Are you doing any kind of letter writing or postcards, or do you do anything like that?
Yeah, I'm not as big of a postcard guy or letter writer as Bob is, but I need to be. Now's the time. But I definitely via just picking up the phone, emailing, that's been really important now, to just kind of stay in touch with people, just drop them a line and ask how they're doing. And that sort of thing has been something I've been doing a lot more. Even outreaching to the galleries, just letting them know that I appreciate what they're doing, by trying to maintain business during this hard time. I think they need to know that they're appreciated, because it can't be easy. And so I've been doing a lot more of that than I think I have. And I think it sparked this thing that I should have been doing this all along,
Right. Well, it makes you, I guess, approach it from a different angle sometimes. The one thing Todd and I talked about last week, and I would think that for an artist, like if you're quarantined, especially in California, New York, and Ohio, and places like that, where you're kind of quarantined. Here in South Dakota, it's like business as usual. I'm still going to work. Restaurants are closed and everything. But my point is, I think as an artist, one would hope that this is like, okay, now I'm in production mode because I'm not selling anything. All my summer gallery showings are closed. Now I'm going to produce. But I wonder if that's even true. If people are, I think maybe it's different for because Todd and I were talking about this other artist that is really struggling at this time. They're trying to get in the mindset of like, where do I go now? And, or how do I approach this? And so it can be debilitating, I suppose, too, for some. But are you hearing from your art friends? Are they more productive or more about production now? Or is it just another day at the office?
No, I think there's definitely something in the air with the artists. And I know I felt it myself, some are feeling this kind of like, well, I don't know what to paint, they've sort of lost this focus somewhat. And to a degree, I kind of did that myself for a short while. Then I've got another artist friend who kind of found a whole new direction, and he's just going crazy painting up a storm. But it's definitely he found it as an opportunity to do something completely out of the box, and that sparked an inspiration for him. And I think that's kind of what I'm seeing. I think the artists are like, the galleries have work. This is what I typically do, but do I want to keep doing that? Maybe I don't. Maybe this is a chance to kind of reinvestigate approaches or new styles. And I think that's helping more artists just to kind of explore. Mm-hmm. And I know in my own work, I've been I think that helps me to get myself to the easel nowadays, is just kind of see it as more exploratory. Because it's kind of weird when you become a professional, and I think, as photographers, it's on the back of your mind, it's like, this has got a place to go, right? And when it's not there, there's got to be another reason to get out there and do it.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot more artists discussing that, like what's getting them to the easel, what's inspiring them.
Yeah.
That's where part of that we talked about possibly these changes happening going forward. I think that's, a lot of the conversations I'm having with artists, they just feel like, time for me to try this thing that I've kind of had on the back burner.
Right. Yeah.
I've got the time and, why not? And so I think that's a healthy thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anytime it shakes you up and forces you to move in a different direction sometimes, that's always a good thing. It's about moving forward and changing. We shouldn't be stagnant and just doing the same thing over and over, to change your look or your perspective or how you approach a different, or maybe how the medium you're doing, just to switch it up,
Yeah, exactly. I think so. I think you'll see some new things out of artists.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking for myself, I know that I'm finally at a place where I feel like I can be productive again. It took me a few weeks. It took me like a week or so to process what's going on. And I was kind of in a holding pattern. And then I kind of went through this kind of funk period, and I kept myself busy with other things, but definitely not photography oriented. I did other tasks, kind of those menial tasks that I always put off. And now I'm finally at a place where I'm like, all right, I'm kind of been able to breathe again. And whatever this is, it's going to be what it is. And now I'm ready. I'm kind of feeling today, especially, I was very productive.
Okay.
And, feeling like I was, kind of getting back in the saddle. And I imagine, from artists will experience that from person to person themselves. And this time, what kind of advice would you give other artists as a seasoned veteran artist that have experienced not necessarily this, but have seen a lot of different things? What would you say to them? And you went through, we went through a recession in 2008,
right.
And I imagine that that might have been a difficult time. What would you tell other artists?
Right. I guess newer artists coming up, I think one experience I've realized through the years is that, the art business is definitely a roller coaster ride. There's going to be good times and not so good times, and you got to be realistic, when you've got something good that happens, don't go crazy with that money, save it. Or invest it in something, splurge a little to go celebrate, but then, be practical, because it's, as artists, we sort of go through these spells of dry periods where the work's not selling, and then boom, suddenly you get a sale and someone will, buy 10 works and you're flush, and you just sort of get used to this sort of roller coaster thing. And I think the advice would be just, when it's good, that's celebrate, but then, hang on to as much of that. When it's not so good, know that that's probably going to change and things will get better. There's an upside that's down the road. Just stick with it. It's not the time to bail out, because it's definitely, the art world is something that you want to invest a lot of time and love in, and stick with it. Good days are bad. You just want to stick with it. Keep doing the thing. I kind of, in fact, I relate my art career. I kind of consider myself as a farmer. You got to get out there, sow the seed, wait. It may not sprout. You might get a whole patch of stuff that just didn't produce anything. And then you get another thing that does produce something. It might be something unexpected, and then every year you keep doing that. Sow those seeds and do your best to keep it, to maintain it and help it along. But no, there's probably going to be some things that don't sprout for lack of a better word. And that's helped me to kind of resolve the art world in a way, but I think the key is that sowing the seed, that as long as you continue to do that, continue to go paint those paintings and paint them from your heart, then that's it. You've got that thing planted, and what happens with it, nobody knows. But the important thing is that that seed is planted. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
No,
I
think that is a good analogy.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, what kind of things do you do with your money to help ensure that if some unpredictable thing happens, that you're good for those times where it kind of, things kind of dry up, or like I like to always say that, there's a little bubble in the line, and
Right.
if you've done this long enough, as long as I have, as long as you have, obviously, that just like the advice that you imparted to everybody that's listening to this, that it eventually comes back around, it comes full circle. But so what do you do to ride out those slow times?
Yeah, definitely. You know that every time there's a rise in things, if you've had a great season of sales, just anticipate that there's going to be a slow part to that. So just be cautious, bank what you can, be frugal. I mean, we've learned to be frugal and notice, stretch a dollar as much as possible. I think that's key. And when it goes, and if it goes really well, that's a time, to invest in things that you think would be, bring some money in another realm. We've invested in land and things like that. I've invested in art myself. I said I traded too, but we've purchased paintings, but those are, I don't want to sell them. So I don't know if that's a good investment.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is. I love it because it's a great investment in terms of what I love. But so you just know I guess the roller coaster ride. There's going to be ups and downs, and just know that and be prepared for that throughout the year. And, some years are going to be great and others are not. And, it's interesting when you get these, the forms the Social Security company sends out, and they kind of show you what you've made every year.
Yeah.
It definitely is interesting to see that, that up and down. You're like, oh, yeah. Wow, this was, 3 years are really good. And boy, what happened that fourth year?
So, and I think the good thing about what you're doing too is you do workshops. So you're diversifying your income streams. You do your paintings, you have your workshops, and so I think that's a good way to, maybe in this case, maybe not so much just because, we're all kind of confined to where our space is, but if things aren't selling well, you can always go do a workshop. So,
exactly.
And so I got a question for you. So I know your work starts where, well, maybe I should let you say where your work starts as far as in sales.
The price line?
Yeah.
Price average. So a small work like the little one I showed you framed in a gallery would go for about $1,100, $1,200.
Okay.
Up to my largest works are up around $10,000 for a 30 by 40. I don't do a lot of works much larger than that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about the price range. Most of my work is probably between the $3,000 to $7,000 range.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's another way to diversify your income streams is you got your stuff that's, your premium artwork that's going for larger amounts of money. And then, your stuff that's on a smaller scale that you can be a little bit, I don't know, affordable or whatever for the average person, but.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of galleries have these shows called miniature shows.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a great way to get new collectors in, kind of get them introduced to the art. They're usually small works, affordable, and, at a good price point. And so, a lot of galleries will do those sort of things. And in the large works sort of are reserved for, I don't know. I've had new collectors buy a large work first time out too. So it's, there is no rhyme or reason.
Right, right.
That's having done this now, since not 85. Hate to say it's as soon as I say this is the way it is.
It's always changing, I'm sure.
It's always changing. So it's kind of kept me, open to that, to how things change. So the market, one year small paintings will sell well, and then the next year you can't give them away, and large paintings will sell.
Right. Have you seen a big change in? Oh, I'm sorry, Todd. It's your turn.
No,
Go ahead.
Right.
Okay.
No, go
Have
ahead.
you seen a big change in even where galleries are working? We've kind of ran across some artists that said, Santa Fe was the place, and now it's changing to like Tucson or maybe Whitefish or whatever. You've seen some of the galleries, obviously galleries come and go, but have you seen markets specifically in your genre shift from one big community to another, or?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So when I started, Taos was thriving. I mean, it was just a hot market, and I was lucky to get into a gallery down there. Denver's always I know artists have said it's been a tough marketplace, but I've always had a lot of luck in Denver for some reason, knock on wood. But yeah, Scottsdale, I was just talking to an artist friend who lives down there, and we were talking about the galleries, how much that gallery district has changed. Mm-hmm. It used to be a thriving downtown Scottsdale had tons of galleries, and Friday night they would have Friday night art walks and just tons of people. And now that whole market has shifted, and that gallery scene's much smaller. A lot of those galleries have now become like brunch places, and so that has shifted. So marketplaces definitely shift. The beautiful thing about an artist is you can kind of move to where you don't necessarily have to live there physically, but your work can go to those marketplaces that are more active. So, I think Scottsdale's Jackson Hole is still doing really well. This just last year for me, talk about some changes. I was invited to do shows in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas, in Missouri, markets I normally don't show at, and I had my best sales in these places. Nice. That I would have never even thought were possible. So it's right. Be open to that, kind of look around and see. I would say tell the artist to talk to the other artists, find out what market areas they see are doing well. A lot of us will talk about where's the hot market right now? And it's hard to pinpoint one place like it used to be, it'd be Santa Fe or Scottsdale or, Aspen, but now it's a little harder to pinpoint. So I don't know if you're hearing that from other artists yourselves, but
that's a question that I think we've just recently started to ask, especially after we talked with Michael Untied. And then, so yeah, that's definitely one of the questions we'll continue to ask other artists, so we can kind of get a sense of where people are showing and how sales are in certain regions. But I get the sense just in the little bit of time that we've been asking that question, it's exactly how you answered it, that it's kind of, it's all over the board. It's hard to pinpoint necessarily, what's good for one artist isn't necessarily great for another artist as far as a market is concerned. And people have, different regions where they're known and they're collected. So, but yeah, that we'll continue to ask that question for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I would add to that is, the artist is always going to be most effective in their own backyard, so to speak, where you have accessibility to the galleries, where you can kind of get to know them and visit with them on a regular basis. That's always going to be a strong place to start your market, and that's kind of what I was advised with too, just, get to know your local market and grow out from there. And I think I believe that would still hold today, if you live in Denver, go do your best to market in this region and then expand to Vail or, Telluride or, and then go from there.
So let me ask you this, Untied does, he hasn't done it in a while, but if you listen to that episode, he does these $100 paintings that he ends up auctioning, and he actually does pretty well. He said he was, and who knows, maybe in this environment, you'll see him do some of those, but he can knock these out pretty quick, he says, over the course of a week. And then he holds these auctions and he starts them at $100 because that's kind of a price point that he found works. But he always sells out of these things.
Yeah.
And they sell for a lot more. Have you ever done anything like that? And then Bob Ragland, he does shoebox painting. So
right.
he always has something for somebody. And so for, again, $100, you can get original Raglan. Have you ever done anything like that, or do you do anything like that?
I do. This is kind of more related to the workshops because I remember early on, it might have even been Bob who said, "Do you ever take your paintings? You should take like a box of paintings to the workshops." And I always thought, no, they're paying plenty of money for my workshop. I don't want to hustle paintings as well. But I started doing it, and I offered them at a really good price point, unframed, small works. And I actually bring them in a box, unframed, and I'll set them up and say, here's some like the still sketches I showed you guys. Oh, by the way, if you're interested,
go ahead. Hey, we'll give you time.
That's right. That's why you're here. Bitch.
But it definitely is added to the income to take works that are affordable to the workshops. You have an audience of 15 people who took your workshop because they like your work, and they might want to go away with the souvenir, so I offer them a really good price point, and I kind of do it as a, it's this week only kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
When the workshop ends, the price goes back to my normal retail price. I think I saw that a few times in workshops I attended where the teacher brought works and it's like, I can finally afford one by this artist. So definitely, yeah. So that's kind of my, what Mike calls it. That's kind of my version of the little Charlie paintings.
That's right. That's what he calls them.
Yeah. I listened to your podcast. I thought that was brilliant. I was like, that's really smart, Mike.
And actually, that was the question I was trying to get to, but I was going about it all wrong. So thanks, Todd, for reading my mind and asking the follow-up question. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So here's another question I'm going to ask you, and this is from hanging out with our friend Bob Ragland. Obviously, if a sale is made through the gallery, that is between that person that's purchasing that particular art and that gallery. But if somebody came to you direct and wanted to buy something or see what your inventory is at the moment or whatever, are you willing? Do you do any kind of payment plans, or willing to work with somebody as far as a payment plan is concerned, so that maybe somebody doesn't have, especially right now, maybe they don't have $3,500 for a painting, but they said, hey, I could make installments over 3 months or something. I don't know. But doing some kind of installment thing or a payment plan, is that something that you do or have done before?
I have done it. It's interesting because I don't see where a lot of my collectors tend to want to do the payment plan.
Sure.
They usually just want to pay the price. So that's interesting in that regard. But one of the things, when it comes to my gallery ready works, these are works that, are larger size, that are framed, something I would obviously send to a gallery. If someone approaches me or contacts me via my email or website, I tend to lead them to the gallery, or if I find the collector is someone who first saw my work at a gallery and then wants to see if they'll come buy it from me directly, I might sell it to them directly, but I pay the gallery the commission.
And we've heard that from a number of artists that's the way they work.
Michael Nuntine said that too.
Yeah.
Very loyal to his galleries.
I think it's important.
Yeah, it's ethical, and it shows loyalty, and you anticipate that those galleries are loyal to you. You want to reciprocate and be loyal to them. I was just curious.
Exactly.
I know that like Michael Untied, he doesn't really have really inventory, so to speak, and I imagine it's probably the same with you. Is when you get a piece, it's going to a particular gallery. So, but I always ask that question, whether or not
Yeah.
people, if they, and you've been doing this long enough with those other guys that we've mentioned as well, that, most people that know you have collected you before, or, are able to just pay it outright. So,
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that's important for the young artists to know. The galleries are working. If they're in a gallery, the gallery's kind of working for them 360 days, 365 days a year. They're basically your support, your advocate, and so you want to be loyal to that. And I think if one starts to say, hey, I can kind of do a sale on this side or that side, it hurts. It could hurt your reputation in the art world. It could hurt your reputation with the gallery, and so it's. I have found it's just not worth it. In fact, galleries love it when they get a check. It's like, hey, I sold the work, and they said they saw my work at your gallery, and here's a check. And boy, they're just going to work that much harder for you.
So I know that we'll get off the. Do you have any more business questions, Wes? Before
no, I think we can move on. Yeah.
So I know by being friends with you on Facebook, you invited me to a group that, or a group that you, what's the word I want to use? That you're a administrator for, or what have you, and it appears to me that you're very much not only an artist, but a lover of art and an art historian. That you love the history of art. Talk to me about this group that you have on Facebook.
Yeah, that's a relatively newer site. I think it's only been up maybe 2 months now.
Oh, really? Okay.
2.5 months, maybe 3 months. It started because actually I had a conversation, and I am a lover of the arts, and I find, as I see things changing in the art world, and they're sort of moving forward to what's new and different, I find that there's this wonderful history that kind of happened from 1975 to present here in Colorado. And, through my own interest, I've always sort of loved to follow art groups, like the California Impressionists, the Taos Society artists. There was the Bucks County School. There's all these schools of artists that kind of work together in a small region and develop just beautiful renderings of their local country. And, I know like the California Impressionists, there was a period where their work sort of fell out of favor, and you could buy them for a song. And then eventually the next generation discovered them again, and there was some books written about them. And now suddenly their works are becoming much more, they're very collectible. So you see this happen throughout time where this changes. But I was looking, I was kind of curious to see like, well, what was it that, the artists that I studied with here in Denver, or in the early days, there was this Denver group. Are you familiar with the Denver 7?
Yeah, Untied was talking to us about that after our interview.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk about them a little bit.
Sure. So I was very fortunate to be able to paint with one of the members, a guy named, and they wouldn't call them, they weren't necessarily a group. They sort of later were labeled this, but they were just a group of artist friends that shared studios, models, they'd go out on paint trips together. But now they're sort of looked at as this group that worked in the 70s, 60s, and they kind of worked in Taos, and then a lot of them moved up here to Denver. And when I started, they were still active here in the Denver area, guys like Ned Jacob and William Shear and Mark Daly, Mark still lives in Denver. Buffalo Kaplinski still lives here in Elizabeth. I mean, a lot of them are still active and definitely doing well. But I was just curious kind of to see what had inspired them. I just kind of like to follow that lineage. Like, who were their teachers? You know, and I've done that. I don't know, just something I enjoy doing. And I sort of researched back some of the early Colorado painters, some that they might have studied with. And then I was comparing, you know, I don't want to sound like, I don't want this to come off wrong, but I saw what they created, and I saw what this new group of artists started creating in the 70s and 80s and 1990s, and their work is amazing. The quality is just incredibly good. And I felt that it, you know, was as good or if not better than the generation before. So it's a period that I'm really fascinated with, because you go back and look at their works, and it's like this has really not been documented. And what they created is amazing, you know, museum quality works that were created, you know, just in the Denver area. So I've known this writer, a guy named Stan Kuba. He's also now currently the associate curator of the Kirkland Museum.
Oh, okay.
And he's he's written a number of books on past Colorado artists, guys like Charles Adams. He wrote a book on the Denver Art Guild, which was one of the first art clubs in Denver. And that group eventually kind of were the founding members of the Denver Art Museum. So Stan is kind of really into art history in the kind of Colorado area. And he's written some articles for me. Really, I've known him for years, really great guy, but we got talking about this period of time. And so he's, you know, we've been communicating back and forth, and he's kind of really interested in maybe doing some book on it, possibly. You know,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, this would be awesome. So that prompted me to say, well, you know, Stan's not on Facebook, but I thought, well, let me see if I can, it's an easy way to start a photo archive, right?
Yeah.
It's an easy way to get artists to help contribute to that archive. And so I focused mostly on the landscape, because I thought of, you know, well, that's my love. So landscape was the first thing. Like, I want to see what these artists created here in Colorado with just that subject, just landscape. And so I started this page with that idea that people would start to contribute their works or works by artists that they admire and share it. And then, you know, you can go to the photos and kind of look through this great photo archive of all this work that's been created from like 75 to now to currently. And what I'm, you know, when I do get a chance to see Stan face to face, we haven't been able to get together for obvious reasons. You know, this will be my chance to show him the photos and discuss more about, you know, what was happening here in Colorado in the arts. You know, what art schools did artists go? You went to Colorado Institute of Art. I did. There's connections there. You know, Rocky Mountain School of Art, that was a prominent place for the artists. And a lot of talented artists and photographers and designers came out of these resources. And some of these, I know Colorado Institute of Art is no longer around. Rocky Mountain, I think, they're still around. They moved up to, they're off of Colfax now. But there was, you know, shows that existed. The Artists of America show, which existed for 20 years from 1980 to 2000. It was highly influential to the Denver artists. You know, these were artists that were young, coming out of art school. And, you know, here was this fabulous show. Basically, some of the best talent, traditional artists from across the country kind of were put together in the showcase here in Denver for a 20-year period. And that was extremely influential. You know, the Art Students League started kind of based out of all this. So I just find, you know, where did these artists get their inspiration? What are they doing with it? You know, who were the ones that inspired them and where are they now? And that kind of prompted that. I'm just highly interested in kind of looking back a little bit, because it's fun to kind of look back and say, "Oh, yeah, that was kind of a cool period to see and be involved in." And I know you're hearing this from guys like Bob and Mike, and I know Rose has been in Marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to talk to Rose. In fact, we will at some point a little bit more. And we've got, Bob's about the business. I would love to talk to him. He knows a lot of people. Unteed was awesome because our whole conversation, off recording was all about, the Denver Seven and prominent artists that have come through or are working or have worked in Denver. People do not realize that Colorado has always been one of the art epicenters in America. Like, I think it's way overlooked. Like, they don't think of Colorado as being that. New York, the whole Colorado Springs movement. Do you know this book? Let me grab it. Have you read this book?
I just read that.
Music Medley. It's awesome.
Seriously, I just read it last week. Yes, it's a great. I went down to Dave Cook Gallery. This is before this all happened, and I bought a copy of. Did
he actually have it? Because I think it's kind of hard to find these days. Maybe they did another printing.
Yeah, he had a copy, yeah, it's terrific. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So the book, in case you're listening to this and not watching this, it's called Music Medley, Intimate Memories of a Rocky Mountain Art Colony by Archie Music. And I was actually, I hadn't read it in a while. I read it a couple times. And then today I kind of picked it up on a whim and started reading it. And I just forgot how wonderful it is. I mean, these guys were, they were phenomenal artists, and they were like, they were definitely riding that edge. They were out there, out in the woods, painting with their group of friends, drinking wine or whatever, and kind of partying down and having a good time and creating phenomenal art,
Exactly. And that's, when you hear about the Denver School, and we were fortunate to kind of see some of that. And, I was kind of later in the game, but these were all the art heroes to me. I mean, there was galleries that you could go in. There was one gallery, James Fisher Gallery downtown, and it was on the second floor, and he specialized in showcasing their works. And that gallery, no longer exists, but it was a great, you'd go up there and, you'd run into all these other young artists who were there just sort of at the temple of inspiration, soaking it in. And that's, it'd be fun to just kind of revisit that stuff. And
absolutely. I think history is important, and I think people don't put enough emphasis on that in this day and age. I know it's like that in photography. I mean, it's like with the world of it's different when you're painting. I mean, but I think, but with photography, it's like I always kind of. It's like everybody just woke up one day and everybody had a camera, Digital kind of brought it to the masses, which is interesting, which is fine. I think, just like Kodak and the Brownie camera brought it to the masses at one time, that's what digital did as well. But people forget, I think a lot of times they forget of where the history of photography, where it came from, and all these great masters. And Wes can attest to this. I have a huge library of photo books.
Oh, nice.
I love picking up a photo book and flipping through it and going, looking at, Irving Penn or Cartier-Bresson or some of the other masters. I really enjoy doing that, and I find it inspirational. Like, if I'm lacking in inspiration, all I have to do is go to my library of photo books and start flipping through, and I'm like, oh, geez, well, that didn't take long. It sparks me. So, right.
Exactly. I feel the same way. You go back to these books, and it's just such a wonderful resource of inspiration, and it's exciting, and that sort of I had this wonderful conversation last week with an artist friend of mine, and we kind of grew up together. And he's painting. He lives out in Silt, Colorado, and he was kind of frustrated with everything too, and not knowing what to do. So we talked about the old days, and it really sort of lightened the mood and made us, it's like, yeah, wasn't this great? There was time you just went out and painted, and there wasn't, we didn't think of the marketplace for it. It was just something we just loved to do and experience. And it was fun to revisit, some of the artists that we kind of got to hang out with back then, and shows we got to go to, and some of the even galleries that, we used to, we just maybe took them for granted when they were there, and now they're gone. And it's like, wow, this is, that was really a special thing, because it was there. Bookstores, that was one of the fun things. Artists would come to Denver, and I'd take them to some of my favorite bookstores, just to hound the bookstores for great classic art books. Rosenstock's, you remember Rosenstock's on Colfax? Fred
No.
Rosenstock. He had a bookstore / gallery, and he did some wonderful shows with some of this group, the Denver Group of Seven, and you'd go upstairs if you got invited. It was kind of a special treat if he said, I want to show you something upstairs. So you go upstairs. He had this great collection of Taos Society artists in the attic. But just, just that kind of stuff. And that was a passing era, that's no longer around. And, those sort of things are exciting for me to kind of look back on. And so I post something on this page, and then some of the artists will comment, I remember that place. And, oh yeah, I remember, visiting this artist there, and we went to this gallery, and, it's kind of, I think they're having fun revisiting that as well.
I love your post today. You posted on Meinigers, and I didn't realize that it had been around that long.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to think Remington and Russell used to shop there.
Yeah. Buy supplies. That's awesome. I had no idea.
It's really cool. And, I love photography as well. So one of the things, I was looking up Colorado photographers, and I was so tickled to see that Laura Gilpin actually lived in Colorado at one point. And I think it was before she moved to Santa Fe. And so she did, there's a few photos she did kind of, I think they were in the Springs area.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. I did not know that. I had an instructor at the Art Institute that used to work for her.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Larry Shirky. Do you know Larry Shirky?
Larry Shirky. No, but is he got a website or anything like that?
I don't know what you know what? I'd love to have him on, because he's a really interesting character. Yeah. He had worked with a number of famous photographers, and was a phenomenal instructor. Yeah. I'll have to get him on, because he has some great stories. And
that would be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's interesting that you said Laura Gilpin. I didn't know that she had lived here for a while.
Yeah. It's just to learn this stuff, it's like, wow, this is really interesting. I did not know. As you start to look into it, it's like, I did not know. And then, this period sort of from 75 on, there was a lot of art activity and a thriving market. Denver had a really nice thriving market. Thriving shows, the Artists of America show, when I looked them up again, their last year, they sold, I think it was 1.4 million in sales. And that was like, they were on their downswing.
Wow.
in terms of a show. And you think about, oh my gosh, it was an incredible thing, an inspiring thing that here. And we talked about the photographer, the Al Gould's.
Camera Obscura. I miss that place. That was one of the most wonderful galleries, and that gallery. There was no place between New York and LA that showed that quality of that kind of work, of photographic work, and the the breadth of that. He showed so many different styles of photography, and then just, world famous photographers. It was amazing to go in there, to walk around. And I miss, the whole upstairs was, a little, like a little book library. You could buy photo books, and, you could find stuff there that you couldn't find anywhere else,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
It's
so
sad.
neat to hear.
It's sad that that's gone. Yeah, we talked to a friend of mine who's a fellow photographer, and his name's Chris Sessions. And he actually, I didn't realize this, but he had actually done an internship there at Camera Obscura. And
Oh.
I thought that was pretty cool, pretty amazing that he had that opportunity and that experience.
Right. And you can see where that trail leads. I mean, it's just kind of fascinating. Like, how did he get started, and who all had shows there, and who knows who visited him? Maybe Adams even visited the gallery, at one point.
Yeah. I do believe he had some kind of connection with him. I don't.
Yeah.
Well, he had some of his works there, didn't he? If I remember right.
Yeah, he did. And his longtime person that worked with him, I can't remember her name, doggone it. It'll come to me later. But anyway, I'll have to see if I can get her on the podcast at some point, because she'd be really interesting to talk to, because she's, his friend and worked with him for so many years. So, and he was fascinating to just talk to. He would come up and engage you, and the next thing you know, it'd be like an hour and a half later, he'd be talking about, some particular photographer, and regaling you with these phenomenal facts that you had no idea. So, yeah.
That's that's just, I treasure those memories when you can, it's sad to see it gone, but it's like, is it really gone? As long as it's in our mind, or,
Right.
Can we bring that back alive in some way?
Well, you got to ask yourself, is this whole thing that we're going through now, is that going to spark more of, we already have a great art community and a strong art community here in Denver. Is this going to really solidify it even more, and really promote, when people get out of this situation that we're in? Are you going to see, like, the floodgates are just going to burst wide open, and it's just going to get crazy with creativity and promotion of art and artists? We're already a destination place for people all over the nation. Is it even going to become more so? So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. So what do you think is different now than then? What made let's say the Denver 7, and that kind of, is it the makeup of the galleries that caused that, and now we don't have the collaboration pieces where they were grouped together? Or what? I mean, so what's different about now than then?
That's a really good question. I think that still exists today. It was just, we're so close to it. Maybe
you just don't see it.
But it's there. There's still some fascinating groups, some things that are happening that are exciting, that are happening today. I think there's just kind of, for me, it's kind of, there's sort of a level of joy of kind of going back a little bit, revisiting
the nostalgia of it.
Yeah, seeing it kind of from that vision. But definitely. I know this week I was on the Art Students League is kind of asking me to try to do an online class, on Zoom, kind of like this. And so I said, well, I don't know how that works. So if you don't mind, send me, if there was an artist who was going to be doing a class, so it's like, do you mind if I kind of sit in on the class? And a guy named Raj, I'm not going to say his name right. Raj is his first name, but he's a local Denver artist. And watching him talk to his class, and he was kind of referring to some of the local artists like Kwang Ho and Dan Sprick, and that's kind of how those connections all happen. So we become this sort of loose group, and I wouldn't even call it a group, right? We're sort of loosely connected. And maybe later on, people look at it as like, that was a group, but, it was maybe just loosely connected.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Denver school, in a sense, were in a way like that. They helped each other get a gallery, or perhaps share a model, or share oftentimes they'd get together and share life drawing sessions. They would, if they found a collector, they would try to let everyone capitalize on that as well. And that's fun to see that happen. But I think that's happening today just as well.
Do you think, though, it's a little bit different because we have, these things, computers and phones and technology, that sometimes that kind of gets in the way? Obviously, we're utilizing right now to our benefit, which is great, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do this. If this happened, 20 years ago, this wouldn't be happening, right? But
Right.
do you think that and another thing I think that might come out of this that might be good is that I think people are going to want more of that personal connection. So maybe this is kind of that reboot, maybe this is a reboot for our culture, for our society, for humans in general, to kind of to step back for a second and go, you know what? Maybe the technology isn't, it's a great tool, but maybe it's not as important as we make it out to be. Maybe it's more about this, this conversation,
Right.
this face to face, taking one of your workshops, or getting together with 5 to 7 of your favorite people that create art, and, creating together.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, it definitely, yeah, you can see where, we've sort of in an age, I know in Facebook and Instagram and emailing are all sort of great ways to connect, but it's just not the same as being there, right?
Right.
It's like you and your buddy Wes, you guys go out and shoot photos together. I mean, that's special,
right?
Yeah,
that's always a great day. And when you go out and you get it together with a few of your buddies and you guys go paint, that's
right.
That's a special experience. And,
Right.
And you make memories together.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's one of these things that it doesn't have to be recorded or photographed. It doesn't have
Everything
to be
doesn't
documented.
have to be. Yep.
Right.
It's documented up here, which is a great place where it could be. But just some of the conversations I'm having with artists since this has been going on, I'm sensing that same thing that you're talking about. They're it's like, can't wait till we can get together and do this, and let's try to do it more often when this does go back to normalcy. So
yeah, because I think we take this stuff for granted, the getting together, and then when this happens, it's like, oh my God, I haven't seen you or talked to you, and now it's like, it's a reality check. Like, we can't take this kind of stuff for granted. Let's get together.
Yeah. It'll be, the first time we get to go back and, see a art museum firsthand, that's going to feel, maybe we won't take it for granted.
Right.
Oh no, maybe the third time we might forget. I don't know. I hope not. But at least the first time there'll be this amazing experience. Like, wow, look at this.
Right. Exactly.
I can't wait till that. Well, I can't wait till we get together in person.
Oh, I can't either. Absolutely. I can't wait to hang out with you and one-on-one. Yeah. That'll be nice. I'm looking forward to it. Oh, so we're going to do this again.
Yes, I hope so.
And together. So. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. It's in my calendar.
All right.
Writing it down.
So we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much for spending the time that you did this evening with us, Lorenzo. Who else that's working today in this Denver area or even nationally? Who are some of the artists that you think are out there just doing fantastic work that you go, wow, these guys are phenomenal, and that you really think that you respect?
Oh my gosh, I got a list. Do you want to see my list? It's an incredible list. I haven't, but just in Colorado alone, I mean, you could go, I hope you don't mind me saying names and dropping names.
No, by all means.
Great.
Yeah.
You know,
we want to promote art, and we want to promote artists. So, you know, I think you're a phenomenal artist. I really do.
Thank you.
Not just blowing smoke. When I looked at your stuff on your website, I was like, wow, just mind blowing, really.
Thank you. Well, wait till you see these other guys' works. You'll be like, that Chavez guy can't. Seriously, there's, you know, painters that got John Encinius, Ramon Kelly. I know John Encinius, Mike Lynch. He was sort of at the tail end of this Denver Seven, highly influential. And these guys are all living painters. Sculptor Ken Bunn, who's got a studio on Wazee, and I think he bought it back when, you know, it was back in the 90s or something, when it was a good time to get in there. But gosh, you just go down the list. I mean, just, you know, Raglan, obviously Raglan. You know, I know you talked to Mike, but Buffalo Kaplinski's really interesting guy who lives out in Elizabeth. Mark Daly's, oh my gosh, this guy, they need to do a book on his works. It's phenomenal. One of the best painters in America. And right here in Denver. I mean, I could just keep going on for another hour.
No, yeah, but that's a great list.
And just kind of trickle out to the rest of Colorado. But there's just phenomenal painters who have added to the dialogue of art here in Colorado and have added to the story of art. And you know, it's like they've had articles, and maybe some have had small little catalogs or books, but, you know, nothing profound has been done. It'd be fun to see something more important. And I'm hoping Stan will be the man.
There you go. Yeah.
Well, Lorenzo, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. Like I said before, if people want to check out your work, they can find you at what? Where would they find your work?
www. I don't know if you need to say that anymore. www.lorenzochavez.com.
Perfect.
That's my website, and from there you can link. I've got a newsletter you can sign up for if you're interested, and there's also an email link there, and then on Facebook at my Lorenzo Chavez.
Fine art.
I'll make sure that there's links. I'll put that in the episode description. So I'll have your website and I'll have your Facebook page on there so people can find you. And if they want to check out your work or purchase, they can find your galleries and find you that way.
Great. Thank you, guys. I appreciate what you do.
Oh, thank you.
Keep going. This is fantastic. You're adding to that dialogue and history of this area, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's been an honor. Like we'd said before, your name had been brought up more than once as, people to talk to. And so I'm so glad Todd was able to arrange this. This has been a wonderful opportunity. I can't wait to meet you in person.
Likewise, guys. Yeah. I look forward to it.
All right. Well, for Tenet, this is Todd Pearson.
And this is Wes Brown.
Have a great week.